Good evening and welcome to the July 31st, 2018 meeting of the Rhinebeck Central School District Board of Education. We're going to start with a public hearing on proposed updates to the district-wide safety plan.
Yeah, great, thank you. So a couple of years ago, actually May of 2016, the State Education Department released some updates to the state legislation, and which will impact the safety plans. But they gave school districts 2 years to make the changes. So we're in that cycle right now. Just to bring to your attention a couple of things that were changed. The numbers of fire drills that school districts were required to hold were changed from, it used to be 12 fire drills. That was changed from, it's still 12 drills, but now 4 of them I think have to be emergency evacuation drills. So they didn't change the total number of drills, they just kind of changed the type of drill. So the plans that you have in your packets reflect the correct number of drills. They also changed the date by which you had to have the first 8 drills done from December 1st to December 31st. That's reflected in the changes. Plans now require the district to designate a chief emergency officer who is responsible for coordinating communication between staff and law enforcement and first responders, and for ensuring staff understanding of the district level safety plan, as well as being responsible for ensuring completion and yearly update of building level emergency response plans. I'm referred to, or the superintendent's title is referred to in these plans, at least in the district plan, as the chief emergency officer. That's a new designation. It's not really a new function, but so I have another title. What else? The other thing it makes clear in the Commissioner's regulation is that the building level emergency response plans are not public information because they are specific to a building, and that kind of information is specific enough and critical enough that the State Education Department doesn't want that information to be out in the general public, because somebody who was bent on doing not good things would know exactly where kids are going to be taken, moved to, et cetera, et cetera. So people, they're not subject to FOIL, the building plans. And that's kind of been, we've operated under that assumption over the years, but now it's codified in the update to the state legislation. I'm trying to think of what else was of any great significance was in there. I can't think of anything, but everything for us to be in compliance with the changes to the state legislation have been baked into these plans. There are 3 plans: 1 plan for Chancellor, 1 plan for the middle school and the high school, because it's the same building. In fact, last year, for the first time, we were required to update these plans to the State Education Department digitally, and we did because their directions weren't very clear. We did a separate plan for Bulkley Middle School and Rhinebeck High School, even though it was essentially the same plan, but we did 2 different ones, and we got this panic call from the State Education Department after they'd been uploaded saying, how come you have 2 different plans for the school if they're in the same building? Well, you weren't very clear about the fact that we didn't. So they've clarified that you only need one plan if there are multiple schools in the same building. It's a building, not a school-based plan. So we've taken care, we took care of it last year, and we'll only upload 2 this year, the 2 in your packet that are not district-wide, the building-specific ones, and then the district-wide one. I don't believe we have to upload the district one as far as I know, but that's public information. I mean, it's not subject to any kind of FOIL exemption. Anyway, each of the 3 plans has modifications that I think I've highlighted them in yellow so you can see what the changes were. Each of the plans is developed by a stakeholder committee, which involves administrators, teachers, non-instructional staff, members of law enforcement.
There was a parent.
Parents, yeah, and so it's not unlike other plans that are supposed to be developed with input from various groups. One thing I would like to mention is that I think nobody has to jump up and raise their hand right now, but it would probably be a good idea for us to have a board member on the district team, not so much on the building teams because they're really focused very narrowly on their own building and evacuations and whatnot. So give some thought to one of you serving on the district safety team, which I'm anticipating probably wouldn't meet more than quarterly, if that much. So again, I don't need to know now. The heavy lifting for right now has already been done, but going forward, I think it would be a good idea to have a board member participate in that, much like we have a board member participate on the CDEF team and some of the other non-board committees, but that I think board representation would be a good idea. So I'll bring that up again, maybe at our next meeting, and people can give some thought to whether they can fit that into their busy schedules. What else? I had Laura brought one item to my attention, and I will speak in generalities because those plans are confidential plans, but the Chancellor plan has the name of one of our staff members who just recently is not one of our staff members anymore, so that name's going to have to be excised, and we're going to have to replace that with another staff member. So without going into the details of that, when you approve these later, it's with the understanding that that change will be made before we bring these to the staff. And part of the requirement is that within the first 15 days of the new school year, we are required to, and the building principals do this at their own building meeting on that first day back. They're required to discuss the building emergency plan with the staff members in each of those buildings. One of the things we have to do a better job of this coming year is we're also required to do these new regulations to do the same thing with new staff members. People we hire during after the start of the school year. So we'll have to set up some process where the building principals will need to sit down with that individual within 30 days of their hire and give them a copy of this and kind of take them through that. And sometimes it happens during the year and sometimes it doesn't. But this is for any staff member, instructional staff, non-instructional staff, regardless. So we're going to have to put that on our radar and make sure we do do that within 30 days of their starting employment, or within the first 15 days of the school year, whichever is applicable to that situation. Other than what is, highlighted in the 3 plans, I mean, if any of you have questions about it, I mean, I'll do my best to answer them. I'd rather be cautious about answering questions about the building plans in a public venue that's being recorded. I'm a little less concerned about discussing or answering plans regarding the district plan, because it's not under the veil of FOIL exempt access. So I'll leave that open to you. I've tried to give you a thumbnail sketch. I'm not sure if Sandy is here to weigh in on any of the plans, but maybe she's just here because there's not much good on TV tonight.
That's for sure.
Or lack of excitement from the Rhinebeck exchange having been concluded. Got to fill her evenings. I don't know. I don't want to judge, but we do. Part of the new regulations, we have to have a hearing before we can act on at least the district plan. We don't for the other plans, because we shouldn't be having a hearing on those plans. So.
I think Steve had a question.
Yeah.
I had a question on kind of the feedback loop. So if you do one of these 12 drills and there's things that didn't work well, what's the process for whoever notices that to raise it, and what does it flow to these committees?
Yeah. It's I believe it's embedded in all of the plans, or at least the building emergency response plans, that first of all, we always invite like law enforcement, fire service, whatever, to participate and observe the plans. And while I would say that all of those agencies don't observe every single time, because there are a lot of drills, many of them do most of the time. And we ask them to observe and provide us with feedback, and then the individual building principals will go back to their safety teams and say, we had a problem with this, let's talk about how we're going to do this better the next time. So there is that feedback loop after every drill that we do. Yeah, and even if we don't have, which is rare, but even if we don't have somebody from law enforcement or the fire service here to observe, we're observing ourselves. And whether it's the building principals or I'm there, Sheldon's there, we're looking at what's going on and saying, what's with that? That didn't work really well. Often staff members will come back to us. For example, something we get, I remember we did our last drill this past year was a lockdown drill, and there had just been a situation. It wasn't the school shooting in Portland, Florida. It was one in Texas, maybe, that happened a short while after that. And part of that scenario was that somebody had pulled the fire alarm. I don't think it was the intruder. I think it was, and I could be wrong here, I think it was like a substitute who thought that was the right thing to do. So somebody pulls the alarm, and then people crowd out into the hallways, and if you're there to do some harm, now you've got everybody out and unprotected. So the last drill we did, I'm not sure about the one in Chancellor, but I know the one here, we pulled the fire drill shortly after the lockdown, and everybody got locked down, and then we pulled the fire drill to see who would, or if anybody would, are people like absorbing this, that you don't come out unless you smell smoke or see flame or whatever. And that's baked into these plans as well now. And I remember standing out there with 2 SROs, somebody from the state police, and we're observing. And during those lockdown drills especially, because obviously there's a heightened awareness lately of that, more so than fire drills, which we've been doing for 100 years. And they will go throughout our buildings. I assume they do it at Chancellor. I know they do it here because I've been part of that. I mean, they'll go from room to room and look in to see if they can see anybody in that room, or does the teacher have the kids sufficiently out of the way and quiet so that an intruder who looks in that door wouldn't know that there was somebody in there. I mean, this is the world we live in today, so we want to be as well prepared as we can, and they'll go around and check, and then they'll come back and say, you know what, I could see kids in the corner of this room. I can hear noise in this room, and it's not like a punitive thing, but you know, we'll talk to the teacher and say, you know, you got to keep your kids quiet. You know, this is not a shelter-in-place drill, which is you can continue teaching your class. It's not an intruder in the building. It's something going on outside that we're not letting anybody in. You could still carry on other than changing classes. You know, we don't want a lot of traffic in the halls. And the police are very helpful with giving us feedback on what works, what doesn't work. But that particular drill, I remember seeing some kids in the bathroom, and it's like, I probably mentioned to Ed or John, I said, there's kids in the bathroom, they're supposed to be in a room or pulled into a room or whatever. What were these kids? And they said, we didn't hear anything. Of course, you know, I've heard that once, you know, if I had $1 every time I heard that. We didn't hear anything. Well, as it turned out, we tested the PA, and the PA speaker in that it was a bathroom. The PA speaker was dead. They didn't hear anything.
Interesting.
And again, in a real situation, that could have been a huge problem, depending on who and where. So that alerted us, right, Sheldon, that you got to fix that thing because there's a problem there. And we do check them, but sometimes they work for X number of months, and all of a sudden they don't. You know, there could be good reasons why they don't, or kids messing around with them or whatever. But that's something we need to check every time. We need to get that feedback and make the adjustments. So we do that after every single drill. More so for like the lockdown drills than for the fire drills. Again, the fire drills are pretty much pro forma, although we have more frequently done like we always used to do them during a class period. So fire drill, teacher takes the kids outside, take attendance, take them back into the building. That's pretty easy, and you can do that in your sleep. But what about pulling a fire drill when we're changing periods, the kids are in the hall? They're not with a teacher. They gotta go outside, they gotta find who they were with, they gotta queue up. It's more challenging, but lunch periods, same thing. You know, I mean, nobody likes to do them during lunch periods because it disrupts the lunch period. You know, kids only have so much time to eat, and if you pull them out for 10 minutes, then that's a hassle. But that's something we need to do, not every time, but occasionally. Blocked exits, that's another thing we do with fire drills especially, is Sheldon will block off a set of doorways down at the end of this hallway around the corner. So all the kids go down that way because that's the normal way, that's the quickest way out, and they get there, whoop, it's a blocked exit. We gotta find what's the next closest way out, and they gotta figure it out. Just to keep them on their toes, because it's not always gonna be the same. There could be a fire down at the end of that hallway, so they need to learn, and they and their teachers need to learn how to improvise, because it's not always going to happen the easy way. It's going to happen sometimes in a different, unusual, unexpected way. So we try to mix it up and then see, how did that go? Wow, that was bad. We got to do something different with the teachers in this hallway because the kids ran around in a circle and didn't know what. You know, it depends. It's always a different experience, but it's good. And that's why we drill, to figure out what's not working. And sometimes it's somebody who doesn't know how it works, like a substitute. And that's challenging, because we have substitutes in and out, and it's a revolving door as to who you have in a given day, and that's a tough one. I would like to say we've totally solved that problem, but we haven't. It's just difficult to.
Did the approved substitute list get the plans?
Well, good point. And one of the things we're changing this year is actually came out of our district-wide safety plan meeting at the end of the year, and one of the people on that committee is one of our greeters, and that topic came up. How do substitutes? And she said, we have them at the greeters desk when they sign in, but they never take them. Okay, well, if you don't take it and you're in a situation and you need to know what to do in the event of this drill, assuming it's a drill or assuming it's the real thing. So what we're doing, we're changing our. Initially we said, you know what? Why don't we just send them home to all the substitutes when they get their letter saying you're on the sub list for this coming year? Well, somebody in my office brought to my attention, well, if we do that, first of all, what's the chances that they're actually going to bring them with them every day that they come here to substitute, number one, or number two, what's the chance that by some not so great stretch of the imagination, that information now is out in the community. And we don't want the world to know how these drills are supposed to work. We just want the people here with our kids to know how they work. So what we're going to try doing this fall is when our substitutes come in, whether they're instructional substitutes or non-instructional substitutes, they come in, they sign in, they're given a laminated copy of the sheet with there's like 4 or 5 different drills on that sheet, and then when they sign out, they have to bring that back. So we at least know they have it with them for that day. If they lose it along the way, there's not much we can do about that, but we're trying to heighten the awareness of these are emergency drills. You need to know how they work. If you're in that classroom, you need to respond. So when you pick up your key, you pick up this laminated sheet. When you bring your key back, you bring the sheet back. And we have to work with our clericals in our offices to make sure they get those things back from people. And again, they'll lose them along the way, but when we hound them constantly to bring those things back, we hope that they'll be with them more often than those guidelines are not with them. So we'll see how that works. And anyway, that's kind of where we're at.
Anybody else have any questions?
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. So we can close the hearing now, probably.
Okay, so that concludes our hearing.
Okay. Yeah, and we can open the regular meeting.
All right. May I have a motion to come bring this meeting to order?
Do you need a motion?
No, you just need to bring it to order.
We just need to bring it to order. Okay, we're calling this meeting to order. May I have a motion to approve the minutes?
No, before we do that, can I make a statement?
Sure.
I've been directed to state that Laura Shulkin, since she was not at our last board meeting, took the oath of office in our office on July 25th, 2018, and it was filed in our office on that date. That makes you official.
Okay.
Did I
No
do
turn
that?
back now.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Now we can go.
Thank you. Okay, now may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the July 10th organization and regular meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
And we should note that that will be with the modifications that had been made. The two you brought to our attention, that we emailed to everybody today, and the one that Lisa brought up this evening. So it's as modified.
Okay, so approval as amended. All in favor? That's unanimous. Motion passes. We now have a moment for public comment. Would anybody from the public like to speak?
Yes, I would. I hope I guess I have to officially say I'm Sandy King. I'm a teacher in the district, resident of the town. And I hope it's all right for me to take a moment to comment on a couple of motions that I see that are on tonight's agenda. There are two individuals that are coming up for different approvals. The one I would like to mention is Ryan Edson. Ryan Edson, phys ed teacher at Chancellor, a huge asset to our specials program at Chancellor. And he started the backpack program, got that off the ground and running, benefiting so many children in our district who do, have difficulties, finding food to eat on the weekends sometimes. And he's been an integral part of our program, the specials team and the school. He always got involved in things, and I'm sure that, his appointment, or his resignation rather, will be accepted. I'm assuming that, but I do hope that you'll really consider all that he's done, and that they're going to be very hard shoes to fill, and that you will consider the program and try to preserve the integrity of the program and everything that he has done, brought to the phys ed program and to the school at large. So I just, wanted to share that. He's going to be greatly missed, which I think many people are very aware of. And the other one, on the flip side, I would like to commend the middle school and high school principals and the committee that recommended Scott Malisi to be hired in the position for the high school music department, middle school, high school music department. I knew Scott as a student teacher. I've had several student teachers, and he was one that he came in the door ready to go. I could have set him free and not followed, procedure from day one, because he really is an asset, and I hope that you will consider that recommendation very highly. I can't recommend him high enough, and I know that this might not be the correct forum for that, but I just couldn't not mention it. So thank you for your time, and
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. Okay, we're going to move on to reports and discussions. 2018-19 Board Goal Development Update. So I've gotten from most of you comments and notes about board goals for this coming school year. I think we all seem to be on the same page about wanting to continue the goals that we started out last year. And I'm not sure what you guys talked about last time about the structure of our board goal workshop before the next meeting, but
Didn't talk in any detail.
Okay. So I'd like to get some input from you guys about how you want that to work, since it is right before a board meeting. Traditionally, we've done this sort of as a separate standalone thing. We always had, big whiteboards that we scribble all over and collect everybody's thoughts. And so if you guys have some thoughts, ideas, recommendations, I'd love to hear them. Seeing none. All right, so I will compile everything that you guys have sent me so far and get them back out to you before our next meeting, so we all know what everybody's said, and then we can hit the ground running, I guess, hammer it away.
And
Okay?
we're just to dovetail on that, we are meeting here at 5:30 p.m. on August 14. We'll go from 5:30 to 7. We'll hope we get the task done in an hour and a half, and if not, we'll figure out where we need to get additional time from. Some years we've gotten the job done in fairly short order. Other years it's been much more laborious. So we'll see how things work out. If we need more time, then we'll schedule another session sometime. But I think if we start with some good ideas that are, already fleshed out, it'll be easier.
Yeah, no, I agree.
If we-
Gets the
If we
conversation.
decide to do it there, it'll probably not, we'll have difficulty doing it in an hour and a half.
Yes.
If we're wordsmithing it there, right from the ground up, so
Yeah, no, okay.
that will help.
All right, perfect.
Okay.
So we'll do that on the 14th.
Yeah.
And then we move on to board committee reports, which are mine, long-range planning. It was a relatively quick meeting. We talked a little bit more about the Citizens Advisory Committee meeting that we had, and we wanted to plan for our upcoming fall, September meeting with them. We had collected notes from every table at the meeting, and I think Whitney was gracious enough to try to read everybody's chicken scratch and make some sense of it. But we are going to spend some time reviewing that information, and we're sending out a questionnaire-ish thing for those members to let us know sort of what brought them to Rhinebeck, what did they look for when they were trying to make their choice about educating their kids here. So we're hopeful that, I think that's going out soon, and we're hopeful to get those responses back. We also talked about some personnel-related ideas for the upcoming year and in the future. Forecast 5. Tom shared some, it's the July analytic of the month from Forecast 5. It showed testing performance statewide versus Rhinebeck for all kinds of state testing. And there were some data points that are worth looking into, so we're going to share some of that information with Marvin and have him give us some feedback. Tom also went into a fair amount of detail about the state equalization rates and how they're changing. So Rhinebeck, which has traditionally been valued at 100%, is going down to 92%, which will drive our combined wealth ratio up, which means we will get less state aid. I think we are going to try to promote community attendance at our August 14th meeting so that folks have a really good understanding of what it means for, their school taxes. It's reapportioning tax dollars, but it's going to mean that some tax bills will go up and some will go down, and but overall the school district will have less money to get from the state. So the people in our community are going to have to shoulder that burden if they vote to do so.
If I could, the other
Please.
thing that's also in play, and if you own a property in the town of Rhinebeck, you're probably aware, or the village of Rhinebeck, that the town is doing a revaluation of all of its property. And I think it's on a 2-year cycle, starting like now or around now and concluding in 2 years. But that will also have an impact depending on how the properties are revalued. So Tom went to a meeting that was held at I think at the town hall a couple of weeks ago, just to be there and to listen and to educate himself on our behalf as to what's going to be happening and how it's going to work. So I believe he'll speak to that as well, just to get the information out there, because it will, there will be impact on all of the taxing groups in Rhinebeck, including the school districts.
And then last we continued our conversation about our statistical neighbors, getting some more information from Haldane, Blindbrook, and Rhinebeck. Haldane is a smaller school district than we are, but they've already put in place a long-range plan for student enrollment and education. So we'd really like to get a hold of their superintendent and talk to them about sort of what they uncovered and what decisions they had to make. Blindbrook and Rhinebeck are still bigger schools than we are, but they're experiencing declines, and we'd like to know, they're incredibly high achieving, so we'd like to know how they do it. And that's it. Our next meeting is August 15th. We're going to set dates for the Citizens Advisory fall meetings. We're going to try to do them monthly, and then we have another meeting at the end of August, so posted. That's it. Any questions? All right, now we have an opportunity for good news. Anybody have any good news?
Is it the drain outside of Chancellor's parking lot was fixed today by the town? So
Oh, very nice. So it's not going to swallow the cars?
not going to swallow. Not going to kick any rocks up. It looks good.
Excellent.
I'll just mention that the exercise facility over at Chancellor that was won through that end competition is close to being finished. I mean, I think everything's up there that's supposed to be up there in terms of things, equipment, cars and stuff, and 2 dump trucks full of mulch have been deposited there. The Rhinebeck Interact Club helped spread one of the loads of mulch one day and followed by another dump truck full. So probably more than we need there. Sheldon's going to use the leftover mulch for other things around the 2 campuses. So that looks like it will be ready to go before the start of school. There's a training component for the teachers, I mean specifically the physical education teachers, and we're not exactly sure when that will be scheduled, but probably not before the start of school. And at some point there'll be a ribbon cutting ceremony, and then
That's great.
it'll be used. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Any other good news? Yes.
I'm just a font of good news today. Yeah.
Fire.
Well, even though it was not a school-specific activity, we did have the pleasure of hosting the Rhinebeck Exchange here for rehearsals and arrivals and departures and a concert here. I think it was last Monday night. I unfortunately had to miss that because I was out of town, but I did manage to catch the concert that they held the week before up in Red Hook, and one of my children participated in that. It was 10 years ago. That makes me feel really old saying 10 years ago, but he did, and it was really great, and it was a pleasure to support that community and international activity in our school.
So I'll just piggyback on that. As president of the Rhinebeck Exchange, I'd like to thank the school district for their hospitality. All the summer work that goes on in the schools, the custodial staff worked around our rehearsals, and we did have a concert here in the building on Monday night last week, and everything went very smoothly, and we couldn't ask for a nicer reception from the school district, so we really appreciate that.
I have heard from a number of hosts just how wonderful those kids were and what a tremendous time it was for everybody. Host families enjoyed it. Kids seem to have a great time. You guys do yeoman's work to get them all together. It's great. Okay. All right, old business. Do we have any old business?
Didn't somebody mention old business?
I did.
There you go.
I did. Would you please give us an update on what's going on with the capital project?
Oh, yeah.
What things are happening?
Yeah, okay. Some, not as much as we'd hoped, and I assume everybody is aware of the fact that the approval of the capital project by our friends at the State Education Department was, I'll try to be polite here, but it was, in my opinion, unnecessarily protracted, given when we submitted our architect submitted the documents to SED for their review and approval. The project should have been approved around February-ish, which would have enabled the school district to bid out, put the project out to bid, and we were planning, when we voted this in December 2016, to be under construction this summer. Well, when you don't get approval until late May, you miss the bidding cycle, you miss the construction cycle, and either people are already so busy, contractors that is, that there's nobody to do the work, or those who are available are probably not the highest quality in terms of doing the job, and they know they have you over a barrel, so the cost is exorbitant. So in concert with our design professionals, we made a conscious decision not to try to keep it on the schedule just because of the impact to the project and our taxpayers. There were a couple of things, however, that we are doing this summer from the project because they're on state bid, so they didn't have to go out to bid. And those two things are the new access system. It will no longer be a swipe card. It will be like wave the card instead of swipe the card, like at the gas station where some of them have I forget which gas companies, but it's that kind of an access system, not a slide it through the slot there. Both contractors were have been in our district in late June and in July, sizing up the work. The guys, well, I didn't talk about the other one. The other one's a new telecom system, and the guys from the access system started running wire yesterday, so that's actually started. And we don't have a start date yet from the telecom guys, but they are supposed to be doing that work during August. I know August is tomorrow, but I'd probably not be starting tomorrow. And they're tied in because some of the telephone, and probably an anachronism even to call them telephones, but some of the telecom units have a screen and will enable the greeters to see and talk to people outside the school door to ascertain who they are and what their business is there before buzzing them in. So that's connected with the telecom system, so they all have to work together. So there'll be, I'm sure, some challenges getting all the pieces to work together, but that's really what's on the docket for this summer. And I'm happy to report that the work started on Monday, so I was getting a little nervous. Sheldon does have plans to blacktop the what were they calling that?
The Hole of Death?
The Hole of Death, something like that, at the bottom of the hill. I talked to him just the other day, and the issue now is he's getting quotes from 3 contractors for the work, and it's not going to be the level of paving that is baked into the project that we will eventually pave the whole thing, but just like to cut out and pave that bad chunk of blacktop down by the speed bump. So he says the biggest challenge will be the fact that they're really busy now, so we'll be getting somebody who prices the job reasonably and then can be available. So not exactly sure when that's going to get done, and no guarantee that'll be able to get done before the start of school, but obviously he's pushing for that. But we also don't want to pay a premium price just to get a couple of weeks ahead of when most of them are available. So that's going to be on the docket as well. That's not part of the capital project. That'll be coming out of our operations and maintenance budget because it needs to be done, and the whole blacktop component will be bid out with all the other work sometime in the fall for construction the following spring/summer. Jeff?
Oh, yeah.
Was there a reason that couldn't get started earlier?
Yeah, because it had to be bid out. It's not on state contract like the things that we're doing.
So it has to go through the SED approval process.
Yeah, I mean, that's the money that's paying for this is the state-approved project that we're borrowing to do. So that only got approved in late May, so. Excuse me, just one more second, I'm sorry. The way it's done is you bid out the whole project that has to be bid. So if blacktopping is, and again, don't quote me on the number, because I have no idea what the number is off the top of my head, but let's say blacktopping is $750,000 worth of a $12 million project. I don't know. You bid out blacktopping when you're building out glasswork and plumbing and all of the, you bid it out as a package, and then contractors bid it as a big package or smaller packages. So we made a conscious decision not to be bidding out any of this work so late in the season. Again, we pay a premium price for a big chunk of blacktopping if we had bid that out in May. We're only going to buy a little rectangle of blacktopping down at the bottom of the hill there. So that's not going to be a $750,000 blacktopping project. That's going to be it's a stopgap, actually. Did I answer your question? Okay.
Lisa?
So I think you may have answered this sort of indirectly, but I just want to get it clear.
Sure.
So is the plan to bid in the fall for a start in the summer of 2019?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Again, in a more normal cycle, one we were expecting, you'd bid it out in January or February to start that late June, June through maybe September or October.
Right.
But given the snafu with the state ed approval, our people are thinking there's no reason not to, and in fact, it might even be an advantage to bid it out in September or October, lock in the bids, lock in the contractors. Now we're done. We're just waiting for June to get here. The other issue too is we don't know what's going to happen with rates on borrowing for the project. So the sooner we can do that, potentially the better. If we wait until February or March, that's 6 months later, it could cost us more to do the project than it may already be costing us more, as opposed to not having been able to bid it out last February, but better in the fall. At least that's what our architects and construction managers are saying, then wait until January or February. Now we're pushing up against everybody else who's in a normal cycle. We try to get ahead of the normal cycle now, if only by default, but at least maybe we can take some advantage of that fact. So
Okay,
that's
thank
the rationale.
Any other questions? May I suggest that if it can't get done by the start of school, the paving portion, that maybe we send out a note to families sort of explaining when it's going to happen, just because people have it on their minds and,
Yeah.
Facebook will explain.
Yeah. Yeah, as soon as we know, we'll put something out that it's going to be done second week of September or last week in August or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be great.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other old business?
No, I don't.
We have another time for public comment? Nothing else? All right. Other? Mark?
So I just want to mention, I happened to be flipping channels this morning and came across one of the New York City news channels had a report about state testing results won't be available until September.
Yep.
I was just wondering if we had heard anything about that.
Oh, yeah.
New York City
It
schools.
was in the Wall Street Journal on Monday. It's going to impact everyone but New York City a little differently. Apparently the concern, if you read the article in New York City, is that currently people with their kids in elementary school are jockeying for getting them in the best middle school they can, and some of those schools use state assessment data as a criterion for getting in, so those parents are wigging out over not having that information on their kids until later in the fall. In terms of us, and probably 90% of the rest of the districts in the state, it's going to be a headache in terms of scheduling kids for for academic intervention services, because we won't know what their scores are, so that'll be a problem.
Is there any reason that they're giving for not being able to get their act together?
Yes, there actually is, and at the risk of sounding like I'm showing for the state education department, they did give a reason in the article that was in the Wall Street Journal, and I'm glad to read a section of it to you. It did say that the state education department spokesman said the agency would send scores to districts in mid to late September. And state officials said its delay stemmed from the Board of Regents' decision to shorten tests for grades 3 through 8 in English language arts and math to 2 days in each subject last spring, down from 3, which we all knew that. And you also may have recalled that the other thing that went along with that change was that kids would have unlimited time to do the tests. And I'm not sure, I mean, we had some issues with it. Other schools that I heard about had significant issues with like kids staying the whole day, being there 4 in the afternoon working on a test that should have been an hour and a half or 2 hours in the morning. Anyway, he said, he being the state education department official, he said educators must review the difficulty of the questions to determine where to set the score cutoffs that signify performance levels, such as below expectations, proficient, and excellent.
Educators have to do that.
Well, it's state education people, and I'm assuming that the comment about educators is that they're going to be hiring educators, people, elementary teachers or whomever, to come to Albany and work on reviewing these. Don't look at me like I'm give me that look
It's killing me.
I know.
Hiring them in May.
I'm just reading the quote from the Wall Street Journal. You asked me for the reason. That's the official reason.
Thank you.
I'm not buying into it, but that's the official reason.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Truly.
Right.
Any other?
Yeah.
They had to wait until the couple of people, they had a couple of engineers who were, doing the approvals.
Yeah.
They had to wait for them so they could hire them.
Right.
Well, it makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense.
Sorry.
No, that's right.
That's how it worked.
I have another other.
Yes.
How to say this? I wanted to report out to the board on some of the feedback and recommendations from the building level safety teams. We talked about their putting the plans together and making modifications that they needed to, but they have also been meeting to talk about changes to make or to propose to make our schools safer, especially in light of some of the incidents that happened in other schools this year, but wasn't just this year, of course. But certainly what happened in Parkland, Florida, really galvanized people's concerns across the country, and you all know this because you read the newspapers just as I do. So I wanted to mention some of the things that have come up in their conversations, because they are not without consequences, okay? I'll start with the middle school, high school building safety team, and one of their recommendations is, and there were a lot of suggestions that were raised during the course of their meetings this year. But what I asked the building principals to share with me were consensus recommendations. I mean, if you have a group of 10 people in a room and one person raises a recommendation, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody else thinks it's a good idea and buys into it. So I asked them, them being the building principals, to share with me the consensus recommendations. And there are a lot of other ideas that are still being discussed, okay? This will be an ongoing process, probably for much longer than we like to think it is. One of the recommendations from the middle school, high school building level safety team was to end the practice of accepting tax payments on school grounds. As you may or may not know, every year during tax collection season, we have a fair number of people who come into our building to walk down to the district office to pay their taxes in person. For whatever reason, they like paying their taxes in person. They could mail them in. They can pay their taxes in different ways, but they like paying them in person. Well, what that does, and it's worse on some days than the others, especially like towards the end of the cutoff for the first, no penalty payment period, etc. There are a lot of people walking through our building to go to the district office, and they have to walk through our building because the district office is not handicapped accessible. So they have to come up, if they need handicapped accessibility, they have to come up the ramp at the front of the building and come through and walk down past the middle school cafeteria and then reverse that on the way out. So the recommendation is that we end the practice of taking tax payments here. So what would be the alternative to that, you might ask? We have been having conversations with our bank, which in Rhinebeck is M&T Bank, and Tom has been making arrangements with them to accept tax payments in person there. They can also send them in to M&T Bank's main office, which is in Buffalo. I think, don't quote me on this, I think they could probably still mail them here. There will still be work for Sue McCormick to do here, because they'll send us, every evening they'll send us a list of payments and we'll do the reconciliation here, but we won't have the parade of people through our building during those key times. So I want to mention that to you because there may be some people who aren't happy about not doing what they've been doing for the last 50 years or so. But I think it's in the interest of a safer school environment for our kids, and certainly we're going to have to make sure we communicate that to our community, both by printing it on the tax bills and I said to Tom, I think we should print them on the tax bills, but not everybody reads their tax bill. I said, I think you've got to put a separate piece of paper in those envelopes that says in large letters, this is how it works. But I'm letting you know because I don't want to surprise any of you by doing it without telling you, and then all of a sudden you're hearing from people and you don't know what the heck is going on here. So I'm mentioning that to you. And if there are any objections to any of these things that I'm going to mention to you, you need to let me know before we get too far down this road or that road. Another recommendation that's been made, this is from this building, is to close the schools, fields, and track to visitors during the school day. That was a consensus recommendation except for one person on that team. So on days like today, wouldn't matter. You can run the track or play frisbee or do what they want to do on our grounds and fields. But during the school day, there's a concern again with having people that we don't know who they are out there.
Can you define school day? Will it be
We will
8
have
o'clock?
we will have to define school day, and we'll work with the building team to do that, but I'm thinking that, and again, don't quote me because I have to work with them, and that this came out of the high school, middle school building safety team, not out of Chancellor team. At least up at this point, that hasn't been raised the same way it's been raised here. And I think probably because it's more adults out here using our track, for example, than there are adults maybe using the facilities at Chancellor. Maybe there will be adults using the new exercise thing during the school day, and we may have to address that. And I'll take my cue from what the Chancellor safety team once done at that time, but right now doesn't seem to be an issue for them. So I don't know what the start of the school day is, whether it's 8 o'clock when first bell rings, or whether it's when traffic is coming in and kids are walking to school and kids are getting out of cars. I mean, I could make a case one way or the other, but we'll have to have a more serious discussion about that when the administrative team meets next week. But and it's kind of the same issue with after school. Sometimes of the year it's not a problem. Other times of the year you got kids having practices out there. I tend not to see people from the community using our track when there are kids out there using it themselves. I think most people are sharp enough to realize, yeah, this is not cool for me to be running my laps when there's a track team out there running laps, and there's a soccer team practicing there. So I'm not sure if the after-school thing is going to be, how much of an issue that's going to be. I see more people in the morning before school when I drive in to work than I do at the end of the day. Again, the summer wouldn't be an issue.
Right.
And I see a lot of people using our facility during the summer.
Yeah.
And of course, enforcement's going to be something that you guys are going to be talking about.
Yes,
too.
and we've started to talk about that. Apparently, we have currently we have the capability of seeing. We since you were on the board only a very few years ago, we have increased our video camera presence both in the school but also outside the school. We've had it outside the school for many more years than pretty recently inside the school. So apparently the greeters here are able to see if there's anybody out there using the track, like in the morning, even if PE classes aren't out there, they can see people. And somebody, Mark Berg, Ed Davenport, John Chemnitzer, somebody's going to have to walk out there and say, we got to put some signage up too.
Right, yeah.
So we don't want to just blindside people with a change. They'll have to say, sorry, but can you come back later, or come earlier tomorrow before school starts or whatever. And during the lunch period, we have aides out there with middle school kids who are out there using the track, and somebody's got to say something to anybody who doesn't get the message. We're going to have to work that out. the logistics of that too.
While you're having those conversations,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the play, because there are kids here on Sundays until late, and, you know, so that definition of school day, is
Yeah.
it when kids are on campus ever?
Yeah.
That's kind of tough.
Yeah, and I don't think that's what they're thinking, but I want to speak for them. I'm thinking relative to your example, you know, when the kids are here for the play, they're typically inside.
Yes.
I mean, they're not playing outside, they're inside doing their thing, so I'm not sure how use of the track has much of an impact on them. I think I'm more concerned about when we have the entire school population here. Again, anything can happen anytime. But in terms of trying to focus our efforts, I'm thinking the focus ought to be when we have, you know, 600-700 kids here on this campus, and anyway, you know, we're walking this fine line between overreacting and underreacting, and it's not just our school district. We're one of pretty much everybody's dealing with these issues, but I think we're trying to walk that fine line to increase safety without overreacting. And no matter what we do, some people will think we're overreacting, and some people will think we're underreacting. So I think it's a lose-lose. But I think we have to do some of those things, and I support the feedback that we're getting from people. And these building level teams have law enforcement as members of those teams, so it's not just coming from any individual or group of hysterical people. I mean, these people have a background, and I respect their opinions. I'm just giving you guys the heads up here as we draw closer to the start of school. There is a system, a software system called the Raptor system. There are other products out there as well, but the Raptor system is one that I've heard a lot about. And school districts that have the Raptor system, when you, as a visitor to the school, come into the school, you, I believe it's a swipe system. You swipe your license plate, your driver's license, thank you. You swipe your driver's license, and that runs a check as to whether you are a registered sex offender. It's not like a general, if you've done any kind of criminal, if you have any kind of criminal, it's not a criminal background check. It's not that broad, but it will give you information that this person's a sex offender, or the other thing it does is this person has a court order against seeing some kid who's a student, an order of protection, thank you. So there's been some talk about that. It is not inexpensive. It's my understanding it's somewhere around $6,000 or $7,000 per school.
To purchase.
Yes.
And then do you any idea of the running cost?
Not off the top of my head, but it's not inexpensive. But as an alternative to using something like that, the safety team has recommended that when somebody comes here as a visitor, they sign in, they surrender their driver's license to the greeter, they go about their, go to see the guidance, their child's guidance counselor or whatever, and then they get a badge, which they get now. They get a little visitor badge, and that when they come back, they surrender their badge, they sign out, they get their driver's license back, they go on their way. There's no software checking for those things, because I think we have a pretty good handle on orders of protection. We're small, so we're not dealing with hundreds of orders of protection. If we have a handful of them at any given time, and we pass that information along to our greeters, so they're more likely to know that. But it's kind of a less expensive way to make sure that people come here, we know who they are, they go about their business, they sign out when they're done, they get their stuff back. Again, there may be some people who are not comfortable leaving their driver's license there. The Raptor system kind of gets around that, but there's a cost there, so they're looking at that. And this came up from the Chancellor safety team as well. So just let you know, that's a concern in both buildings. Right now, everything else I've told you has just been focused on middle school, high school safety team. Jacqueline?
Do you know, does the Raptor system produce, if there's an order of protection by anybody, or just linked to somebody in the school? Because just thinking, a lot of the people who are connected with shootings have domestic violence records, and that might be associated with an order of protection somewhere. And then there's the question of, if that brings up a result, then what do you do? Do you have a min? Like, what happens if it triggers?
Yeah, that's what.
I'm sorry.
That's what.
Like, what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think my sense is that different school districts that use that handle it different ways. I mean, if you have, for example, an SRO who's there 5 days a week, then you probably call your SRO over and say, Mr. So-and-so is, came up on the Raptor system, and, he'll need to leave now, we can't be, again, it's, but I have a kid here in the school, and I need to see my kid's guidance. So, again, it's, the scale's tipping both ways. But I can find out the answer to that particular question, and I will. We haven't made a commitment to buy into the Raptor system yet, because it's a cost, and we didn't budget $12,000 to put 2 Raptor systems in here. There's a less expensive way. It's obviously not as robust as that. And just putting all these things on your radar. Another thing that came up from the middle school, high school is something that we emailed about a little earlier today, and somebody spoke to us at our board meeting about the Stop the Bleed kits. Somebody had come to one of our meetings in the late spring and offered to, I think it was raise money to purchase these Stop the Bleed kits. This has come up in both, I believe both of the, I'm not sure I'm seeing it on the chancellor list, both the middle school and high school safety team list. The question that we're looking into, and we've asked our school nurse and our school physician to give us some feedback on that. The question is, if you have these kits deployed in a school, which you would use in the event of a violent act, a shooting, a stabbing, something like that, where somebody's bleeding and they need first aid, Stop the Bleed, right? That's the name of the kit and program. What's the likelihood that if the school's in a lockdown and somebody's in the hallway with a wound, that somebody is going to leave the safety of the lockdown room to administer first aid? I mean, it's like a logistical conundrum that's come up in the discussions at these safety teams, like, who's going to do that? And are they going to endanger themselves and the kids they're supposed to be taking care of? I mean, again, it's just a terrible scenario to even be talking about in this day and age, but we know the reality of what's out there. So that's been the major thing. It's not the kit. A suggestion has also been made, well, we could possibly we as a school district could possibly make up our own kits, that is, one of law enforcement said, yeah, I've seen them, we could put them together at a lot less the cost and not in a, in a little canvas bag that says stop the, you know what I'm saying. So, I mean, we're looking to that as well, but it still raises the question, what kind of situation would somebody actually be able to use it other than after the incident, at which point you'd have EMTs and law enforcement here, you wouldn't have to worry about putting a tourniquet on somebody because they had a stab wound. So that's the question. I mean, it's a recommendation, but we're still waiting to hear back from our medical people as well. Does that make sense? How many? Where should they be? One in every classroom, one with every AED. The nurses have them. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure that parent also said that there's some training involved, and there may be, with this kit, there may be recommendations about how you manage a violent situation.
Well, I mean, we'll have to look into that some more. I'm sure at the very least, there's got to be training like how to put a tourniquet on somebody to stop the bleeding in an emergency. I mean, I wouldn't expect somebody who did not have at least that level of first aid training to just intuitively do that. It's not like an AED where it's like idiot proof. You listen to the machine tells you, put the pads here, press this button. You don't need to have CPR to use one of those machines. This is a little different, but there's got to be some level of training regardless.
Yeah.
So that's a good point. Those are the major things from the middle school, high school. They've also had discussions, they talked to the student council at the high school and asked them for some input. The student council has suggested considering extending the lockout at the middle school, high school building until like 4:30 in the afternoon. And by lockout, we mean single point of entry. You gotta buzz in or go through an adult to get into the building. Right now, we have an adult on duty until I think it's 3 or 3:30. So we would, in order to accommodate that, we'd have to extend that. So that means a person's time for an additional hour or hour and a half. So again, something that I'm sure will continue to be discussed, and I think the rationale from the student council was that there are still a lot of kids around for various things after school. So again, just sharing that with you. Another idea that's still kind of not fully baked, I guess, is to block off the middle school, high school bus circle, except for when buses have to drive in there at the beginning of the day and the end of the day. You don't having quite a few people during the day pull in there because it's easier to pull in there and drop your kid off there or run your kid's lunch into the greeter's desk. And I think the less vehicular traffic you have in there may be a case to be made that it's a little less likely that somebody with bad intent is going to be pulling up to the front of the school. Again,
There will be a riot.
I was gonna say.
that's the interesting thing with a lot of the school safety stuff is that some people will like it because it make them feel safer, and some people will hate it because it inconveniences them. Just say it.
I understand.
Okay. And the last thing from the middle school, high school team was additional school resource officer time on campus.
This is from the student council?
No.
Or-
This is from the building safety team.
Okay.
I read the one thing from the student council about having adult presence in the building until like 4:30.
Okay.
No school in Dutchess, just so you know, no school in Dutchess County has a single locked out point of entry 24/7. No one does. No one is employing people to sit at their front desks till like 11 o'clock at night on a school night. And I've heard it suggested that that's what we should do. I mean, I've heard a lot of suggestions over the last couple of years, but for better or for worse, nobody in Dutchess County does that. Maybe it's obviously it's a, it's an expensive thing. Yeah. So I will shift quickly to CLS. I only say quickly because there are fewer things on their list. One of the things is it's been brought up that there's an issue with the bathrooms in the classrooms at Chancellor, that you can basically walk through the entire hallway just going from bathroom to bathroom. So we are installing locks on those doors this summer. They've been ordered, they'll be installed, should be installed before the end of the summer. There's also a question about access to a master key in the office. I assume so that subs can get to where they need to get, and also have the ability to lock a door if they need to lock a door, or access a door if they need to get into a classroom door. So my understanding is that a locked key storage box is going to be installed in the elementary school with a key for each classroom, so when a sub comes in, they can sign out the key to that door, so we don't have to have a master key floating around, or have the elementary principal secretary unlock the door, then it's unlocked for the entire day. So if there's an emergency, that person and those kids can't lock themselves down if there's a problem. So, again, as I mentioned before, the idea to collect the IDs of all visitors and return when they sign out, or have something like the Rapid system deployed. A couple of other things from Chancellor. Have vests for administrators in order to readily identify them to police during an emergency. Install concrete barrier planters in front of the main entrance to prevent vehicles from being used as weapons. It says at dismissal time. I guess it could probably happen anytime. An idea to end early pickup in the CLS entry hallway at 3, and after 3 have parents use the general gym pickup. I have to pursue that more with Brett. I'm not exactly sure logistically how that would work out. In terms at the district level, as I mentioned before, we're putting the access control proximity system, the proximity cards, that's what they're called, as opposed to swipe cards. The installation's begun on them. Telecommunication system I already mentioned to you. The high school, middle school group had suggested that we have an anonymous tip line. So we actually can access that through School Messenger at no additional cost. So we're looking to implement that at the start of the school year. And there's been some questions about training for staff in terms of classroom defense and intruder response strategies. I have located somebody who I think is north of us up in the Boces, just north of us. It's Sequestro Boces, I think. And I think they have a program to do that. So we're looking into building that possibly building that into one of our superintendent's conference days to provide some training to teachers that at least some of them seem to want. It's like a lot of things. It's like learning how to use an AED or learning CPR. Some people want it and some people don't want anything to do with it. And I've heard the conversations within the context of CPR and AED. Don't train me to do that. I couldn't do that in an emergency if I had to. I'd be worthless in that kind of a situation. Don't even waste my time training me. And other people like, yeah, well, I really want to know how to do this because I want to be able to help out. So all of these things are going to be, I think, met with mixed reactions. But anyway, that's the end of my short list. There will be more. We will be doing some of these things. If there are any of these things, especially on the consensus recommendations that you see as particularly problematic, please give it some thought and let me know by the next board meeting at least, so I can.
Can you circulate your list?
I can.
Mark, I think, had a question.
So I'll just add that I think, just from hearing the list, I don't think anything on the list really sounds totally unreasonable. I know, there's a cost to the Raptor system. There are other systems out there that do the same thing. I'm not sure what the cost is of the various systems, but it might be worth looking into what they do and what the cost is, just to see if there's another system that can do the same work for less money. But, certainly none of these items seems to be unreasonable, to me at least.
I appreciate the feedback.
Anyone else?
Like I said, you don't have to give me your feedback tonight. I appreciate having Mark's feedback, but please don't wait until after we implement something and then say, well, I thought that was a dumb idea in the first. I knew people would go nuts if you did that. I need to know if that's the feeling of the board before I do it, and then we'll be guided accordingly. Bottom line is, you're going to answer to the public for what we do,
So, if I may suggest.
Sure.
If you would circulate the list and give us a date by which you'd like to have our feedback. And that way, that gives you some closure on that.
I will give you the list this evening before you leave, and I would like to know by the next board meeting if you have any concerns or think we should beg off any particular thing on that list.
Thank you.
And I'd just like to add that as with all of these changes and things, I think the more we can publicize these broadly, the better, just because then people expect it rather than get blindsided by it.
Absolutely.
They understand the impetus is really for kids' safety.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Any other? Okay. All right, so we'll move on to our action items. Good night, Sandy.
Bye, Sandy.
Good night.
Is there anyone who wishes to remove anything from the consent agenda? Steve?
I'm not sure if I can do just a portion of.
Yes, you can.
Okay, 6.1.3.1.
Yep.
Okay. All right, so we'll remove that
Fine.
from the consent agenda. Anyone else? Okay, may I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the consent agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes.
Can I say anything about these things we usually acknowledge?
Oh, yeah.
Now that they're buried in the
Now that
consent
they're buried in the
agenda.
consent agenda, I would very much like to thank the Rhinebeck Science Foundation for their very generous donations, grant awards for the high school video production program and the middle school Madagascar lemur presentation. We really appreciate their ongoing support of our programs. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the following resolution? Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby authorizes the board president and superintendent of schools to execute the 2017-18 implementation certification form for the annual professional performance review for classroom teachers and building principals pursuant to the Education Law 3012-D and Part 30-3 of the Rules of the Board of Regents.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. And I guess for purposes of clarification, it's not unanimous, Diane's not here today, so okay. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve a leave request under the Family and Medical Leave Act to Nicole Sandoval to commence on or about December 25th, 2018, with such leave to be taken as paid medical leave through the period of disability as certified by a physician in writing through February 5th, 2019, or thereabouts, to the extent of her accrued sick leave, and thereafter to grant additional unpaid child care leave through August 31st, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve as a final reading and adoption the modifications to board policies number 5300, District Code of Conduct, number 5410, Wellness, and number 8530, Cafeteria Meal Charges. See attached.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the 3-year probationary appointment of Scott Malisi to the position of vocal music teacher assigned to the Bulkley Middle School, Rhinebeck High School, effective September 1st, 2018, in the tenure area of music at a salary of Step 2 MA, $62,210, in accordance with the RTA's salary schedule for 2018-19.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? And we are withdrawing item 6.6 on your agenda. Okay. May I have a motion to move into an executive
Wait,
session?
what about,
I'm sorry?
what about the one that was removed from the
Oh,
consent
okay,
agenda?
yeah.
Oh,
Is that to discuss an executive session?
Yes.
okay. May I have a motion to move into executive session to discuss a particular item from the consent agenda, and what was the other thing?
Of that 6.1.
That was
the one
that,
that's-
okay.
That we tabled.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? We're moving into executive session. Thank you.